A single dad brings his young son to work after his sitter cancels, but the powerful CEO fires him on the spot. Moments later, the boy notices a mistake no engineer could see, a mistake that could destroy the company's biggest deal. What starts as humiliation turns into a quiet story of courage, second chances, and an unexpected connection. Before we continue, tell us in the comments, where are you watching from? By 7:30 that morning, Nolan Vale already knew the day was going to test him. The kitchen light in his small apartment kept flickering. His son's cereal had gone soft in the bowl, and the babysitter had left a voice message that sounded more guilty than helpful. "Nolan, I'm so sorry. My car won't start. I can't make it today." He stood there in his work shirt, one hand on the counter, the other gripping his phone like it had personally betrayed him. Across the table, 9-year-old Arlo looked up from his notebook. He had been drawing bus routes again, neat little lines between imaginary stations, every stop labeled with tiny, careful handwriting. "You're doing the face," Arlo said. "What face?" "The face where you pretend everything's fine, but your eyebrows don't believe you." Nolan almost smiled. Almost. For the last 2 years, it had just been the two of them. His wife had passed away after a long illness, leaving him with hospital bills, a quiet apartment, and a boy who noticed everything. Arlo wasn't loud. He didn't demand much, but his mind was always moving, always connecting shapes, routes, timings, patterns. That morning, Nolan had no backup plan. He worked as a facilities technician at Lumenro Mobility, a sleek tech company in downtown Seattle that built small autonomous transport carts for hospitals. The carts carried medicine, meals, files, and emergency supplies from one department to another. The company was preparing for its biggest demonstration yet, a live test for a national hospital group. Missing work meant losing the contract position he had fought so hard to keep. So he made the kind of decision tired parents make when life gives them no clean option. He packed Arlo's notebook, headphones, a sandwich, and a promise. "You sit in the break room. You don't wander. You don't touch anything." Arlo nodded. "Like a museum." Exactly. A boring museum. Even better. By 9:15, the building was already tense. People moved through the glass lobby with tablets tucked under their arms. Engineers whispered near elevator doors. A giant screen near the operations floor showed live routes from 6 prototype carts moving through a mock hospital layout in the testing wing. Nolan kept Arlo close as they slipped through the side entrance. But before he could get his son to the break room, a cart rolled out from behind a corner, stopped, turned in a slow, confused circle, and bumped gently into a wall. An engineer muttered, "Not again." Nolan recognized him as Drew Calder, one of the lead systems people. Drew dragged both hands down his face. "That's the 4th reset," Drew said to someone on his headset. "No, the firmware patch didn't fix it." Arlo slowed down. Nolan lightly touched his shoulder. "Keep walking." But Arlo's eyes were on the screen. The route lines glowed blue and white. A blinking cart icon moved down what looked like a hospital corridor, turned left, paused, then reversed back toward a loading bay marked inactive. Arlo frowned. Before Nolan could pull him away, a woman stepped out of the elevator. Maris Whitcomb did not need to raise her voice to change the room. Everyone straightened. She was younger than Nolan expected for a CEO, maybe late 30s, dressed in a cream blazer with her dark hair pulled back in a clean, controlled style. But what caught him off guard was her face. She looked calm, yes, but not cold. Tired. Focused. Carrying pressure behind her eyes like she had not slept properly in days. "Tell me something useful," Maris said. Drew swallowed. "The carts keep misreading the west corridor marker. We're checking the navigation model. The board arrives in 40 minutes, she said. The hospital group arrives in 90. Then her eyes landed on Nolan. More specifically, on Arlo. The room seemed to shrink. Maris walked toward them, each step measured. "Nolan Vale, correct?" "Yes, ma'am. Why is there a child on my operations floor?" Nolan felt heat rise up his neck. His sitter canceled. "I was taking him to the break room. He won't be near any restricted area." "He already is." Arlo lowered his notebook. Nolan placed a hand gently on his son's shoulder. "Understand. It won't happen again." Maris looked at the screen, then at the engineers, then back at Nolan. Her expression tightened, not with cruelty, but with the exhaustion of someone whose whole company was balanced on one failing morning. "I'm sorry," she said. "You need to leave." Nolan blinked. "Leave? With your son? Today. HR will contact you about the rest." The words landed quietly, which somehow made them worse. Arlo's small fingers curled around the edge of his notebook. Nolan wanted to explain. He wanted to tell her he had never been late, never complained, never asked for special treatment. He wanted to say that sometimes a good parent still runs out of options. But the entire room was watching. So he nodded once. "Yes, ma'am." He turned to guide Arlo away. Then Arlo stopped. Not dramatically, not boldly. He simply stopped walking, staring past Nolan at the glowing route map. "Dad?" He whispered. "That's wrong." Nolan bent slightly. "Arlo, we're leaving. The map is backwards." Drew looked over. What did he say? Maris did too. Arlo pointed, nervous now, but unable to ignore what his eyes had caught. "That hallway marker says west, but the arrows go east. And the loading bay is on the wrong side. It's like when I draw on the back of paper and it shows through flipped." The room went silent. Nolan's stomach tightened. Maris slowly turned toward the big screen. Arlo took one small breath. "If the carts learn from that map," he said, "they're not broken. They're following the wrong picture." Maris did not speak. For the first time that morning, her calm expression cracked. For a moment, nobody moved. The only sound on the operations floor was the soft hum of machines and the faint rolling click of a test cart somewhere behind the glass wall. Nolan felt Arlo press closer to his side. He knew that look on his son's face. It was the same look Arlo had when he found a mistake in a puzzle book, or when a bus route didn't match the street signs outside. He wasn't trying to embarrass anyone. He wasn't trying to be clever. He had simply seen something that adults had missed. Drew Calder stepped closer to the screen, squinting. "No," he muttered. "That can't be right." Maris did not look away from the map. "Pull up the corridor source file." A young engineer typed quickly. The large display shifted. Blueprints appeared beside the live route model. Two floor plans sat side by side. One was labeled North Wing Simulation. The other, West Wing Delivery Grid. Drew's face slowly lost color. "Wait," he said. "Why is the old mirrored training file attached to the live model?" Nobody answered. Nolan understood just enough to feel the danger in the silence. The carts were not crashing because they were defective. They were confused because someone had fed them the wrong version of the building. Maris folded her arms, but Nolan noticed her hand tighten around her tablet. "How long has this file been active?" she asked. The young engineer swallowed. "Since yesterday's overnight patch." Drew turned sharply. That patch came from external integration. Maris's eyes moved to the countdown clock on the wall. 32 minutes until the board arrived. 79 minutes until the hospital group. A failed demonstration would not just cost money. It could end the contract. It could cost jobs. Nolan could see it in the room now, the way every person suddenly looked smaller under the weight of it. Then Maris looked at Arlo. The boy immediately stared at his shoes. Nolan stepped forward. "Ms. Whitcomb, he's 9. He noticed a visual issue." "That's all." "I know," Maris said quietly. Her voice had changed. It was still control, but the edge had softened. She crouched slightly, not too close, respecting the boy's space. "Arlo," she said, "you saw the arrows were wrong?" Arlo nodded. "How?" He looked at Nolan first, asking permission without words. Nolan gave a small nod. Arlo opened his notebook and showed a page filled with careful route drawings. Some are bus lines. Some were apartment hallways. Some are made-up hospital corridors with arrows, doors, and delivery points. "My dad says maps only work if they match what your feet know," Arlo said. "So I look for where the feet would go." Drew blinked, almost offended by how simple it sounded. But Maris's expression changed again. Something in her eyes shifted, as if the boy had said something she had forgotten. Nolan saw it. Not admiration exactly. Recognition. Maris stood and turned to the team. "Rebuild the live route using the verified floor plan. Remove the mirrored training file. Run one cart manually first." Drew hesitated. "That could take an hour." You have 20 minutes, Maris said. And you're not guessing anymore. Use visual confirmation from the floor. Then she looked at Nolan. I need you to walk the test corridor. Nolan stared at her. Me? You know the building better than most of the engineers. You've repaired every sensor panel in that wing. That was true. He knew which doors stuck, which ceiling cameras flickered, and which corridor marker had been replaced after a water leak. Nolan's pride and fear pulled in opposite directions. You just fired me, he said softly. Maris absorbed that without flinching. I made a decision too quickly, she said. I'm asking you to help me correct it. The room seemed to hold its breath. It wasn't an apology. Not fully, but it was the first honest crack in the wall between them. Nolan looked down at Arlo. His son whispered, We can help, Dad. We? Arlo lifted his notebook. I can check the arrows. Nolan almost said no. Then he saw Maris watching them. Not with impatience now, but with something almost vulnerable. She was a CEO, yes, but in that second, she looked like a person standing in the middle of a mistake she desperately wanted to fix before it hurt everyone around her. Arlo stays beside me, Nolan said. Maris nodded. Agreed. The next 20 minutes moved like a quiet storm. Nolan walked the test corridor with Arlo beside him, while Drew and 2 engineers followed through headsets. Maris stayed near the glass wall, watching every step on the screen. Each time Nolan confirmed a marker, Arlo checked it against the route. Door C is after the nurse station, Arlo said. Nolan glanced down. Good catch. Drew's voice came through the headset. Updating now. One cart rolled forward. It reached the first turn. Paused. Turned correctly. Nobody celebrated. They were too afraid to breathe. Then it passed the second marker. Then the third. Then it delivered a small white test box to the correct station. Maris closed her eyes for 1 second. Just one. But Nolan saw through the glass. The hard, polished steel mask slipped, and behind it was a woman who had been carrying more than pride. She looked relieved. Human. When Nolan and Arlo returned to the operations floor, the board members were stepping out of the elevator. Maris quickly straightened her blazer. But before she walked toward them, she stopped beside Nolan. Her voice was low enough that only he could hear. I was wrong about you. Nolan looked at her, unsure what to do with that. Maris continued, and I was unfair to your son. Arlo looked up. Maris gave him a small, careful smile. You may have saved more than a demonstration today. Then the elevator doors opened fully, and an older board member stepped out with a sharp expression. Maris, he said, we need to talk before the hospital team arrives. His eyes moved to Nolan's work shirt, then to Arlo's notebook. And why, he asked coldly, is the fired technician still on the floor? Nolan felt Arlo's hand tighten around his sleeve. The board member, Graham Holt, stood near the elevator with a silver folder tucked under one arm and the kind of expression that made people check their posture without knowing why. He looked at Nolan as if a facilities technician and a child were pieces of equipment someone had forgotten to remove. Maris did not step back. That was the first thing Nolan noticed. She moved slightly in front of him and Arlo, not enough to make a scene, but enough to make her choice clear. Mr. Vale is here because he knows the test wing better than anyone in this room, Maris said. Graham's eyebrow lifted. He was terminated 10 minutes ago. I made a rush call under pressure, Maris replied. I corrected it. The room went still again. Nolan had worked around powerful people before. Most of them hated admitting mistakes, especially in public. They buried errors under language like policy, miscommunication, or operational adjustment. But Maris said it plainly. I made a rush call. Nolan looked at her differently then. Not because she was beautiful, though she was. Not because she was powerful, though that was obvious. But because in a room full of people protecting their own image, she protected the truth. Graham glanced toward the test screen. And the boy. Arlo lowered his notebook against his chest. Nolan's voice came out calm, but firmer than he expected. My son noticed the mirrored route file before the launch. He didn't access anything. He didn't touch anything. He saw what was on the screen. Graham's mouth tightened. That sounds like a serious security failure. It was a visual oversight, Maris said, and he helped us catch it before it became a contract failure. Drew Calder stepped forward, nervous but honest. That's accurate. The external integration file was wrong. Nolan and Arlo helped us verify the live route. For the first time, Graham looked less certain. Then the elevator opened again. 3 representatives from the hospital group stepped onto the floor, led by Dr. Vivian Ross, a composed woman in a navy coat with a patient but unreadable face. Maris turned toward Nolan. For 1 second, the CEO mask faded again. There was a question in her eyes. Can we do this? Nolan gave a small nod. The demonstration began without a speech. That was Maris's choice. Nos chaini promises. No exaggerated confidence. Just the work. The first cart carried a sealed test package through the simulated emergency wing. It slowed near a corridor marker, scanned, adjusted, and continued smoothly. The second cart rerouted when Drew blocked a hallway with a rolling stool. The third delivered supplies to a mock pediatric station without touching the doorway. Arlo watched with his lips pressed together, fingers gripping his notebook. Nolan leaned close. Breathe, buddy. I am. You're holding your breath. So are you. Nolan let out a quiet laugh before he could stop himself. Across the room, Maris heard it. She looked over, and for the briefest moment, her serious face warmed. The final cart reached its delivery point. No crash, no wrong turn, no silent disaster. Dr. Ross studied the screen, then looked at Maris. This is the first demonstration we've seen where your team showed us not just the product, but how you recover when something goes wrong. Maris did not rush to fill the silence. Hospital work doesn't forgive arrogance, she said. Neither should technology. Today reminded us of that. Nolan felt those words land somewhere deep. After the guests left for a private meeting, Maris found him in the quieter hallway outside the test wing. Arlo sat nearby on a bench, drawing a new route map with little carts labeled 1, 2, and 3. Nolan was ready for paperwork. Maybe a warning. Maybe a temporary reinstatement. Instead, Maris stood beside him and looked through the glass at her employees. My father built this company like every problem could be beaten by pressure, she said quietly. I thought if I stayed controlled enough, strict enough, nothing would fall apart. Nolan listened. But I almost let pressure make me careless with a good employee, she continued, and with a child who deserved patience. Nolan looked down, unsure how to accept an apology from someone who had changed his whole day twice. I should have told you before bringing him, he said. That part's on me. Yes, Maris said. It is. The honesty made him glance at her. Then she added, softer, but being a parent shouldn't mean one emergency can erase your worth. Something in Nolan's chest loosened. For 2 years, he had carried the fear that every mistake would prove he wasn't enough. Not enough as a father. Not enough as a worker. Not enough to hold everything together. Maris seemed to understand more than he expected. She offered him a new position, not as charity and not as a dramatic reward. A real one. Facilities route coordinator. Better pay. Better hours. A child care emergency policy for the entire operations staff, drafted by the next quarter. And Arlo? Nolan asked carefully. Maris glanced at the boy. If he wants, we could arrange a weekend STEM visit. Supervised. Grupe permisión. No restricted floor. Arlo looked up so fast his pencil nearly fell. Really? Maris smiled. This time, fully. Really? Weeks later, Nolan returned to Lumen Row before sunrise, not through the side entrance, but through the front doors. His badge worked on the first try. His name was printed correctly on his office glass. On his desk sat a small note from Maris. Thank you for teaching us to check the map against the ground. That evening, after a long but ordinary day, Nolan found her outside the building beneath the soft gold light of a Seattle sunset. No board members. No emergency screens. No pressure watching them. Arlo was at a weekend robotics class upstairs, talking too fast to anyone who would listen. Maris stood beside Nolan with 2 coffees in her hands. I didn't know what you liked, she said. Neither do I most days, Nolan replied. She laughed quietly, and the sound surprised them both. They walked slowly toward the corner cafe, not as CEO and employee, not as rescuer and rescued, but as 2 people who had seen each other clearly on a difficult day. Inside the building, a small delivery cart rolled down the correct hallway, turned gently, and disappeared around the corner. And for once, Nolan did not feel like life was pushing him from one emergency to the next. He felt like maybe carefully a new route was opening.